So one of the things I've noticed, having managed lots of customer success people, is that virtually everything that they do could be put under the umbrella called education, right? So our next session is going to be about the changing and the transforming nature of the world of education.
You can't touch this.
If Isaac Newton had done YouTube videos on calculus, I wouldn't have to.
You can't touch this.
What used to be homework, I now have the students doing in the classroom. Our goal is to use technology to humanize what's happening in education.
So most of you know who that guy is. The Khan Academy videos, by the way, are approaching 1 billion views. And they have changed the whole world. I know almost everybody in the room has watched one. So please join me in welcoming the co-founder and CEO of the Khan Academy, Mr. Sal Khan.
You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this.
So very, very exciting to be here. So I always like to start these presentations just getting a sense of how familiar folks are with Khan Academy. How many of y'all have children who use Khan Academy in some way? All right, that's good. How many of you have used it yourself? And how many of you have no idea of what Khan Academy is? Okay, good. That's why we're here. So the folks who are familiar with Khan Academy, a lot of you might associate it with this collection of videos that I started making for family over 10 years ago, and that still is part of Khan Academy, but we're much, much more than that now. But to get everyone on the same page, I will start with a montage of those videos.
Of these interactions are just due to the gravity.
This is an age right after Isaac Newton.
I'm told the humidity makes it feel hotter. Why is this?
Excellent question, LeBron.
And you can just see the pleasure he had.
Can you determine which light bulb is being switched?
Things actually can interbreed, although for these two in particular it seems like the mechanics would get kind of difficult.
And I can keep playing around with these numbers and see what kind of colors I can come up with.
If this does not blow your mind, then you have no emotion.
Glad you appreciated Euler's identity. But as I mentioned, it's much more than videos. A lot of your children might already be doing this at home or in their classrooms where they can go. They can pick their grade level mission. If they need to go backwards and remediate, they can. They can learn at their own pace. They get as much practice and feedback. There's a bunch of game mechanics. It's all aligned to standards, and it correlates with performing on benchmark exams. So there's a lot to learn. It isn't just about watching a video. It's about practicing and getting feedback on it. And we'll talk a lot more about that in a little bit. Just to give a snapshot of where Khan Academy is right now, it's being used in almost every country. Well over 1 million educators are using us in some way, 37 million registered students. But before I talk more about where we are, where we're going, I'd like to rewind back and talk about how all of this got started, because it was a somewhat surprising story, at least for me. In 2004, I was a year out of business school. I was working as an analyst at a very small hedge fund. It was myself and my boss. And I had just gotten married. And I had family visiting me from New Orleans, which is where I was born and raised. And just came out of conversation that my cousin, who was visiting me, was having trouble in math. Because of that, they had placed her into a slower math class in 7th grade. And I asked her about it. And she says, yeah, unit conversion, I just can't get it. And so I offered to tutor her. And she agreed. She goes back to New Orleans, and then every day after work for me, after school for her, we're on the phone working initially on unit conversion. A couple of weeks, she eventually gets unit conversion. Then she gets a little bit caught up with her class. Then she actually starts getting a little ahead of her class. I start teaching her some of the basic algebra. And at that point, I became what I call a tiger cousin. I called up her school. I said, I really think Nadia Rahman should retake that placement exam from last year. They said, who are you? I said, I'm her cousin. And surprisingly, they let her take that test. And that same Nadia that was being placed in a remedial math class because of unit conversion was now placed into the advanced math class. And so I was pretty excited. Very small intervention on my part. I was able to connect with a family member, hopefully kind of nudge her onto the right trajectory. So then I started working with her younger brothers. And then over the next year and a half or so, a bunch of stuff happened. One, the firm I was working for, we moved from Boston to the Bay Area. But more importantly, word got around the family that free tutoring was going on. And so every day after work, I found myself with 10, 15 cousins, family, friends all over the country. We were on speakerphone. We used to use like Yahoo Chat and Doodle to be able to see each other's writing. And to help scale up, I started writing some software. I saw pretty consistently, regardless of what type of a student they were, they might be in an algebra class, they had some gaps in fractions. They could use help there. They're in a trig class, they had gaps in algebra. So I started writing software to give them practice problems. And that was the first Khan Academy. It was almost a joke because it was me and them, and the domain name was available. And so I kept doing that. All my friends knew I had this crazy project. And once again, this was a hobby, my day job. I was working at the investment firm. And it was in fall of 2006. I was at a dinner party showing this to some friends. And one of them said, well, Sal, this is all cool, but how are you actually scaling up your lessons? And I said, you know what? It's hard. I feel like I have to repeat them. The scheduling is hard. And he said, well, why don't you record them as videos and upload them onto YouTube? And I immediately said, no, that's a horrible idea. YouTube is for cats playing piano. It is not for serious mathematics. But I went home that weekend, got over the idea that it was not my idea, and I decided to give it a shot. And I just started making videos on stuff that my cousins were having trouble with. I made maybe 20 or 30 of them, started telling my cousins to watch it before we got on the phone. Then after about a month of that, I asked them for feedback, and they gave the somewhat backhanded compliment of telling me that they liked me better on YouTube than in person. And at first, that's a little bit counterintuitive. Why would you like the live thing, et cetera, et cetera? And to be clear, they didn't say that they didn't appreciate the interest I was taking and the time and things like that. But when you really view it from their point of view, it made a lot of sense. And we've all been there. When you're trying to learn something that's a little bit intimidating, a little bit technical maybe, it's intimidating for a live human being waiting for you to learn that material. Hey, this makes sense, right? And you feel pressure to say, yeah, it makes sense. Or if you're in an algebra class, it's embarrassing to admit that you forgot your fourth grade mathematics, or if you're in a calculus class that you forgot your algebra. So I took that as positive feedback. I kept going, making more and more and more videos, uploading them onto YouTube, just assuming that only my family would watch. But it soon became clear that people who were not my cousins were watching. And at first I saw the view count go up. Then I saw the comments started to come in. And a lot of those early comments were just simple thank yous. And even that I thought was a pretty big deal. I don't know how much time you spend on YouTube. Most of the comments are not thank you. They're a little bit edgier. But then they got more intense. Comments and letters. This was the reason I was able to pass my algebra class. This is the reason why after leaving the military, I'm able to re-engage at the community college. I got a letter in those early days, and I brought my wife over. I said, this is incredible. And it was a mother, and she said both of her sons had a learning disability, and these videos were what was allowing them to keep up with their class. And because of that, her and her entire family were praying for me and my entire family every night. And you can imagine how strange that felt for me on some level. You have to remember, I was an analyst at a hedge fund. I was not used to people praying for me, at least in that way. And so I kept going. Fast forward to 2009, there was about 50,000 people who are using this hobby, these videos, the software, and I frankly had trouble focusing on my day job. So wife and I, we looked at our finances and we said, okay, we have enough resources, maybe for a year. It was really a down payment on a house, but it took the plunge. And I think anytime you do anything entrepreneurial, whether it's for-profit or not for profit, you almost have to start with that delusional optimism. But as soon as you do it, you quickly realize, well, reality. And you start having meetings with people, and they say, well, this is great, but it's not exactly what we fund, or we've already allocated our budget for this year. And so I was kind of in that situation for the next 7, 8, 9 months. Frankly, very stressful time of our life. Our first child had just been born. We're digging into our savings, about $5,000 a month. I was getting a few $100s off of PayPal from $5, $10 donations. If it was any of you, thank you. But it was tough. But then all of a sudden, this was 10 months into it, a $10,000 donation came in. And so I immediately see who it is. Her name is Ann Doerr. I immediately email her. I said, thank you so much for this incredibly generous donation. This is the largest donation that Khan Academy has ever received. If we were a physical school, you would now have a building named after you. And Ann immediately responds back. She says, well, I use the site myself with my daughters. I'd love to learn more about what you're doing. She was local. She was in Palo Alto. And so we meet at an Indian buffet restaurant in downtown Palo Alto like 3 days later. And Ann asks, so what's your goal here? And I told her, when you fill out the paperwork with the IRS to become a 501c3, a not-for-profit, there's a part of the form that says mission, and they give you about a line and a half. And I filled out a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And Ann said, well, that's ambitious. How do you see yourself doing that? And I said, no, just to be clear, this is a mission. I don't plan on being able to just check it off this weekend and then moving on to healthcare or something. But I explained that, over the next years, obviously these videos already existed. We could translate it into the languages of the world. I showed her the software and how that could grow and cover more and more topics, ways to connect students, ways to build tools for teachers, internationalize, et cetera, et cetera. I showed her the usage of how the site was growing. And Ann said, well, you've made a surprising amount of progress. I only have one question. How are you supporting yourself? And in as proud of a way as possible, I said, I'm not. And so we kind of process that, or she processes it, and we part ways. 5 minutes later, I'm driving into my driveway in Mountain View, and I get a text message from Ann, and it says, you really need to be supporting yourself. I've just wired you $100,000. So that was a good day. That was a good day. And frankly, that became the beginning of a cascade of crazier and crazier things. A month later, I was running a summer camp with a friend. The whole idea being, hey, if you can get all this explanations and exercises virtually, well, then a physical experience, it's not about replacing the physical experience, it's about liberating the physical experience to do more games and projects. And we were in the middle of one of these games. I had 6 7th graders playing a game of Risk, while the other 20 traded securities based on the outcome of the game of Risk. Good game. And while that was going on, I started getting text messages from Ann, which you can imagine I now take very seriously. And there were 6 or 7 of them. It wasn't clear what order they came in, but they read along the lines of, this is Ann texting, I'm at the Aspen Ideas Festival. I'm in the main pavilion. Bill Gates on stage, last 5 minutes talking about Khan Academy. So I didn't know what to make of this, so I immediately boot the nearest 7th grader off of a computer. And I start looking for some evidence of this event that Ann is talking about. And in about 5 minutes, I actually found the video footage. And this is what I saw. And it's Walter Isaacson, the head of the Aspen Institute, asks Bill Gates, open question, what are you excited about?
There's a new website that I've just been using with my kids recently called Khan Academy, Khan. Just one guy doing some unbelievable 15-minute tutorials. My favorite vignette is that guy, Salman Khan. He was a hedge fund guy making lots of money, and he quit to do these little web videos. And so we've moved, I'd say, about 160 IQ points from the hedge fund category into the teaching many, many people in a leveraged way category. So, that was a good day, the day that his wife let him quit his job.
So you could imagine, at first I was like, is this really happening? Then I actually became nervous. Those videos were for Nadia, not Bill Gates. Then I went home and, I was like, what do I do now? And do I call him? Assuming he's not listed. And it was they left me in that state for about 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I was in my walk-in closet about to record a video. And my cell phone rings, and I see it's a Seattle number. I answer it. Hello. Hi, this is Larry Cohen. I'm Bill Gates' chief of staff. You might have heard that Bill's a fan. Yeah, I heard that. And if you're free over the next few weeks, we'd love to fly you up to Seattle and learn more about what you're doing. And I was looking at my calendar for the month, completely blank. I said, yeah, I got to cut my nails, but I think I can. So we had that meeting eerily similar to the meeting with Anne, and then that was allowed Khan Academy to really get office space and get the resources to start hiring up a team. And what we immediately started working on was that software piece of Khan Academy. And what you see here, we call this our knowledge map, and each of those circles there are a concept in mathematics. At the very top are very basic mathematics, and as you go down the map, it goes all the way down to college level calculus and statistics. And if you drill down onto any one of those circles, it's what we saw a couple of screenshots ago, where you can get as many exercises as you need. And the model is if you master one of the top concepts, it'll then move you down to the next concept. And if you master that, if you master basic subtraction, it'll move you to more advanced subtraction. In a lot of ways, this is completely common sense. This is the way that you play a video game. You keep working on level 1, and only when you beat level 1, you go to level 2. But this is not the way that a traditional academic model is structured. In a traditional academic model, we group students together, usually by age, and then around middle school perceived ability. We move them together at a set pace, and what typically happens is, let's say we're in a middle school algebra class or a pre-algebra class, teacher gives a lecture on exponents, we go home, do some homework, we review the homework, another lecture, another homework. That goes on for about 2 weeks, and then we get a test. And on that test, I might get a 80%, you might get a 90%, you might get a 95%. And even though that test has identified gaps in our knowledge, we ignore those gaps and we move on to the next concept. It's going to be negative exponents or logarithms. And those gaps keep accumulating over time. So at some point, you're in an algebra class, and it doesn't make sense, not because you're not bright or because algebra's hard. It's because a teacher just wrote an exponent on the board that was in that special case that even the A student, that 5% they didn't know, got addressed. Or you're in that calculus class, and that gap in your algebra all of a sudden showed up. And so the philosophy, and we didn't invent it, it's called mastery-based learning, is instead of holding fixed when and how long you learn something, like in a traditional classroom, with that variable outcome, A, B, C, D, F, do it the other way around. What should be variable is when and how long you have to learn something, and what's fixed is that every student should get to that A level. Every student should get to mastering the exponents. And to get an appreciation for how much potential there is in the world if we just allow people to tap in this way, I'll show this next montage.
So I actually dropped out of high school twice, both during my freshman year. And when I eventually came back, I was put in sort of lower level math and science classes because I was so behind. Then I discovered Khan Academy, and I was able to skip 2 years worth of math just through using the site. And I came into school, I took the exam with students who had been enrolled in the class all year, and I was actually able to get the highest or the second highest scores in the class. So for me, Khan Academy really changed the trajectory of my entire life, because without it, I don't think I ever really would have been inspired to learn and to love math and to love science. I ended up graduating as a valedictorian and going on to Princeton, where I'm now a computer science major, and I'm absolutely passionate about learning, about computers, about math, about science. And without Khan Academy, I don't think that these things would really matter to me the way that they do today.
And what's neat is when we found out he was a CS major, we interviewed him and we gave him a job offer, and he just joined us a few months ago. So in a very strange way, we're helping to solve our own labor problems. Very good. Very good. So anyway, as you know, everything I've talked about is the world we've lived in, but a lot of y'all might be wondering about the rest of the world. These are pictures of Khan Academy throughout the planet, and all of these are incredible stories. But just to give you a feeling of what it could be like in the rest of the world, these are already the efforts going on in different parts of the planet on Khan Academy. I'll show this last montage.
Me comí 2 cuartos de pizza.
L'hypoténuse commune, ok.
7, 13, 15.
और मैं इस हाथ से इस ब्लॉक को धकेलने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ इस डायरेक्शन में.
توجد قطعتين من معدن النحاس والزنك.
P R به توان 2 ضرب داره.
הגיעה הנקודה שבה שוק הסיום של הזווית חותכת את מעגל היחידה.
Ili muweze kuelewa na kuweza.
Into yokuqala ekufuneka siyazi kukuba
kubali.
16 bölü 16 1'e eşittir.
Muitas e muitas outras coisas importantes.
I'm Zaya from Mongolia. Your videos are so interesting and funny. Make more lessons.
And that last piece, Zaya, I think is worth double clicking on. Zaya, it turns out, when I got that video, I just assumed she's a middle class or upper middle class girl. She had access to the internet, she spoke English. But then I read the text of her email. It turns out that a group of engineers came from the Bay Area to her orphanage in Mongolia and set up broadband there. And that by itself was pretty incredible. But since then, Zaya, as an orphan, has now become one of our top contributors of content in the Mongolian language. And so when you hear stories like that, and I tell this to every stakeholder involved in Khan Academy. Khan Academy is now over 100 folks, but there's thousands of people who've helped us in different ways. I tell them, very simply, is that we're at a pretty exciting time to be alive, where I genuinely think we have a chance together of taking this thing called education, this thing that has always been scarce, but it's always been the key determinant between the haves and have-nots, and make it a little bit more like basic shelter or clean drinking water and just a fundamental human right. Thank you.